Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Fermanagh GAA TV. This is our third coaching webinar, with the two previous presentations from Stephen Poacher and Owen Mooney proving hugely popular. So if you missed those, just go along to the Fermanagh GAA website and you can follow the links to them from that website. However, tonight we have two well-known Fermanagh men with us, and they're going to provide a seminar on a very, very important topic, namely performance analysis. So I'm delighted to welcome Derrygonnelly Harps man Niall Smith and Temple Maguire's man Stephen Jackson. Niall carried out the performance analysis role for Peter Canavan during his term. He carried forward this work with Derrygonnelly Harps to great success, as we all know. And last year he helped Dom Corrigan with St Michael's when they went on to capture the Hogan Cup. Stephen, on the other hand, he is currently the performance analyst for Ryan McMenamin with the Fermanagh senior football team. Gentlemen, you're both very welcome, and thanks for coming along this evening to Fermanagh GAA TV. Stephen, we'll start with you, the Temple man. How's life down in Temple?
Oh, it's going well, Jet. Thank you very much. Sun shining, work's busy, and family's all keeping well. No complaints.
Very good. And Niall, all well out in Derrygonnelly and Heartland, as they call it now?
The sun's shining anyway, that's one thing for sure, Jet. So, as it always does, of course, in Derrygonnelly, you know yourself.
The shining and glittering on that New York Cup, would it?
Well, we're looking after it at the minute anyway, so we'll see how it goes, you know.
Very good. Niall, you're involved in performance analysis now for quite a few years, I suppose. Maybe tell us how you got into it, first and foremost.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose this will be my 9th year if football goes ahead this year. I suppose I was lucky enough to get involved at a high level. You know, normally most people when they start at a club level, at a sort of more basic level. I was sort of thrown in at the deep end with Peter, and it was great. I mean, you can see Peter's I suppose how he analyses matches on Sky at the moment, and the in-depth knowledge that he has there. And I suppose it was great for me to learn from somebody like that as my base start. So going forward, basically just had to pick it up as you went along. And I suppose ever since 9 years ago, things have moved on an awful lot. It was really unheard of, apart from the high-end county level 9 years ago. But since that, practically every club team now is doing it, and it's more accepted than it was back then.
And was it a steep learning curve for you back then? Now, had you any interest in it prior to that, I suppose?
I didn't, I suppose. I came from a football background, from playing football, and also obviously involved coaching at underage, and that was sort of my big thing. To end up stepping up to the level that we had to go to, I just had to pick it up very quickly. And I suppose that was the best way. It was basically sink or swim. But the biggest problem that you had was probably player acceptance, because when you're an analyst, you're critical. Some people would say that I'm very good at being critical, so I suppose maybe I fitted it very well there. So when it came down to it, you know, it was player acceptance, and I suppose particularly more senior players would have found it very strange. I suppose somebody coming in, taking notes, and I suppose providing a breakdown of everything that happened during the game, between team performance and player performance. So, you know, I remember trying to sort of convince a couple of players at the start that this was the way forward, and certainly they didn't like some of the statistics that I was providing, but I have to say, by the end of the season, they were coming asking me for their stats, you know, before I would even give them the stats, which was great, you know.
Very good, interesting to hear how you got involved there. And Stephen, from your perspective, how did you get into this sort of role?
I probably came the other route. And in fact, looking back, I think it's probably due to my position on the football pitch as a goalkeeper for 20 odd years. So, like, I've spent my football career kind of standing there watching the game. So I think that naturally made me think about it, rather than players who are all running around the pitch, just go, go, go. So I used to just gather information on scores, score takers, defences for Tempo senior team, bit by bit. Then as I was only a squad member of the team and wasn't playing as much, I would do stats on the line for the senior team. and just sort of get into it bit by bit. And I did it alongside my actual coaching. So I would use analysis to help me in my coaching of underage teams and with county minor teams and stuff I was involved in. So I learned it bit by bit and was always interested in it, because I would be the one standing there going, why is this happening? You know, why is the coach asking a team to do this when he should have noticed that something has happened 6 times in a row over there? There's nobody taking a note of this.
Yeah. So, and how did you get involved then with the Fermanagh senior team in your current role?
So then obviously I had been doing it sort of on and off with both senior team, because I was either on or off playing. And then I was involved as a goalkeeper coach with the county minor team, and I did the stats there. So that gave me the background. And I think our colleague here on the screen knew of my interest in that, and he recommended me to Rory Gallagher at the time, as Rory was looking for someone to help him with the senior team. And I stepped up again, like Niall mentioned with Peter Canavan, massive step up to work with a coach like Rory. His eye for detail was massive, and again, just taking that leap up, learned massive amounts in 6 months. So that's
well,
through it.
We have 2 of the top performance analysis in our county with us tonight, and we're really pleased about that. So rather than me chatting for too long, we'll get a further Q&A later on with both of you, but I think now the listeners and the viewers will all want to see your seminar that you're going to present tonight. So Stephen, I'll hand over to you and let you take it away from here.
No problem. I'll get it going here, Jeff. Thank you.
Good man.
So our presentation here tonight is called Implementing Performance Analysis in a Club Setting. So for want of a better word, we just want to put a bit of structure, a bit of information out there for coaches who may be interested in this kind of thing, or young people looking to get into this kind of thing. And if they're wondering how I can do it, where I can start, who I could speak to, what I should be doing, we're just going to try and give them a flavour for that. And we're going to try and keep it as sort of low level and basic and introductory as we can, and just give everyone a wee taster as to what direction they should take this in. So if we started off, you think about it, any coach, whether they're looking after under 8s, under 10s, all the way up through underage level up to senior teams, we're all analysing, we're all watching what's going on in the game. So as someone once said to me in a coaching course, realistically as coaches, we're always analysing, but you don't realise it. If you're not doing that, then basically you're babysitting. So if you're looking after an under 8 team and you're giving them, and you're not watching what's going on and you're giving them no guidance, you're just babysitting them. Even if it's as basic as telling a player where to stand on the pitch or where to kick the ball, that's it. You're analysing and you're trying to help the situation. So we're all doing it. And if your only resource is your mind, just standing there watching it, all you can analyse is what you remember. And that could be a tiny amount, it could be a lot, it could be something that happened a couple of moments ago, or it could be something that happened 20 minutes ago. It's kind of all over the place. So to try and put a bit of structure on things when you're analysing it, it can be as basic as just pen and paper, and then you could move on to little apps on a smartphone, then it could be up to iPads, then it could be up to video. It just progresses and progresses as you get more and more interested in it, get more and more time and resource. But here, the feel-safe and best way to start off is pen and paper. I think you'd agree on that, Niall, wouldn't you?
I would, without a doubt. And in fact, at times it depends what you're most comfortable with. I mean, there is this thing, focus on technology and all of that. But essentially, pen and paper is as good as anything. And actually, a lot of the top analysts would tell you that. I suppose the one thing about technology is that it's instant. But sometimes you can be too busy pressing buttons and not focusing on the game. So pen and paper is the very best way to start off. And no matter what level you want to go to, I feel that pen and paper is the way to start. And you'll learn the basics well and truly from that. And it'll allow you also to watch what's going on in a proper manner.
Yep. So moving on, so if we start as a jumping off point, performance analysis, and anyone interested in it or anyone within a club setting, so you'd be asking the questions: what is it? Why would we do it? How do you do it? Where do you do it? As in, where would you watch the game? Who can do it? And we're just going to take a guide as to where you would start, take a look at the basics, and discuss where you can take it to, depending on your interest and resources available. So, as both me and Niall said there, what is performance analysis? Why do it? A quote out there is, performance analysis is an objective way of recording performance, so key elements of that performance can be quantified in a valid and consistent manner. And that's a very high-end quote on performance analysis, but it kind of sums up all the things that you're looking to do. And as I said earlier on, that can be just literally a page, information, pen and paper, all the way up to technology. And you would hope the point of all of this analysis is to give you as complete a picture as possible with the resources you would have. So whoever you're working with, you want to give them as much information as you can. You could be working in a club that has no resource, no money to spare, or a team, nothing to spare. It's a pen and paper job, to some sort of team that's got some sort of budget for this, or you maybe have the technology yourself, and away you go. And yourself, Niall, would you say, or would you have any sort of key things that would make people as to why would they do it, or what's it about?
Yeah, well, I suppose the bottom line is you really have to have an interest. You have to have an interest in the game, and you have to have a knowledge of the game to do it in a proper manner. But obviously, you know, we can all be coaches, we can all be players, but it's also framing your thinking into how to be an analyst. So one thing about being an analyst is you have to be subjective. You have to be able to take a step back. And as opposed to do that, you can see that in the quote there, it has to be quantified in a valid and consistent manner, valid and consistent. So in other words, it has to be a true picture, and it has to be consistent from the point of view of what information you're providing to the team and also to the coaching staff.
Perfect, yeah. So if we're to just progress it on, and we start off with, like, how do you do it? One of the key things, I think Niall would agree with any team he's been involved in, and you probably need to learn this as you go along, but it would be good if you could establish it from word go, is you can't really land into the situation maybe trying to put your statistics on the team. You have to work with the coaches and the management and establish what way the team wants to play. What way do the coaches and the manager want the team to play? And that's called establishing the principles of play, which means then you as an analyst can provide a framework to analyse how that's all working. So you need to sit down and have a good discussion with the coaches and the management as to what they're working on in attack, transition, to defence, what the objectives are on kickouts. There could be a few other things as well. You need to nail that down. And you need to ask the coach and the management, how do you want the game to be played? And you need to have real clarity on that. So if the coaches and the management can identify that and say that to you in like 2 or 3 sentences, they have real clarity in what they want to do. And it makes your life a lot easier, the player's life a lot easier, and everyone is going in the same direction, and you then can provide the analysis on that. And I'm sure you'd agree on that yourself, Niall, and you've been involved in more teams than I have. That really works.
It does, without a doubt. The bottom line is you have to establish your role. If you can't establish a role and how that can fit into the overall picture, then there is a problem. So essentially, as an analyst, I've always taken the line that you're in the background. You're there to be asked to answer questions when they're asked, either by team members or else by the coaching staff. But the key thing is you're there to assist, you're there to provide knowledge, but a lot of the time it is when you're asked for it in a proper manner. So those are the lines that you have to establish with the coaching staff right from the word go.
Yep. And then this would lead on, again, it's just a continuation here on how would you do it. So once you've had that discussion with the coaches and the management around established principles of play, you then have to sort of get a real good handle on what the coaching philosophies is called. It's a bit high-end terminology, but basically we all know ourselves what the values of the team are, what the identity is, leadership, behaviours, beliefs. You know what's happening. You know where the ship's going. Are you happy with that? Are you happy to work in that? And then that leads on to that the other third point there, the environment. Are you happy with the culture? What's happening in training? Is everyone accountable? Is it all based on hard facts and evidence? So if you're happy to work within that, either by asking, you might have to ask a bit of background if you've been on previous goings on in the team. If you're happy to work within that, be part of that team. And as Niall says, be part of that team as in know your place. You're not driving the thing, you're only giving help. So you know how the coach works, you know how your role works. It all goes round in a circle and everyone's happy. And I think you said there, Niall, if that doesn't sit right, there'll be conflict and there'll be hassle, won't there?
Well, and that's why it's so important to establish roles in this situation. And also, I suppose, what you've got to look at is the focus between the two elements that you're breaking down. One is the team element, and two is the player element. So you've got basically the team feedback as an overall picture, but you've also got to give feedback to the player in terms of their performance and how they're performing. So you have to establish that with your coach, how far your coach wants you to go in terms of player involvement, and how they want you to speak to them individually, or do they need you to speak to them individually, or is it a case of you feed the information to the coach and the coach then speaks to the player himself? So it's elements like that that you have to establish from word go, because the last thing you want is a player ringing you, you having a conversation with a player and finding then that the coach isn't happy about that. So you've got to know where to draw the line.
That's it. Yeah, it's not as simple as just taking down the black and white stats and firing them out there. There's a lot of other moving parts for it all to work smoothly. If we move on into the next question, if you're starting out looking to get into this, when do you use the information you have? And you might be thinking to yourself, do be running up and down the line, giving stuff into the coach's ear? Is it halftime? Is it pre-match? Is it after match when tensions are high or whatever? You have to gauge the environment, and that's all about knowing the culture and what's going on within the team. But as we said earlier on, one of the most basic ways to do it is just in-game pen and paper. And Niall's put up a little sheet or provided a sheet of an example he would use to collate information. And one thing you've really got to be thinking is the information that you're gathering, is that going to help performance? Is that going to impact performance? Is that really going to help the situation? If you're gathering information, taking loads of stuff down, speaking to coaches, speaking to players, and it's not helping the thing, it's not making the team better, then you're kind of wasting everyone's time. So it has to be good. It has to give impact to the situation. Same as a player on the pitch. Corner forward wants to make an impact. Midfielder wants to make an impact. Needs to do the right things. Analyst, it's the same. And then after the game, you need to review your notes, the information you've taken, watch the video if you're lucky enough to have a video of the match, and use that. That's to provide insight. So you're looking below just the black and white numbers and the figures. You're looking for insight as to how things happened and why they happened. And Niall, would you like to just give us a wee quick chat there on your stat sheet that you have used or you've provided, and how that can help the situation?
Yeah, I mean, the sheet itself, as you can see, it's very well laid out. This is one that was provided by Ray Boyne. Ray Boyne is a well-known performance analyst. He's worked with the Dublin senior team, Tipperary hurling team there in the last 12 months, and also with the Dublin ladies. So he would always say that he finds pen and paper just as good as technology. And this is a format that he came up with. And again, he's prepared to, you can download this. He has that readily available to anybody that wants it. So you can see there, it's very straightforward. You can add things in at the bottom if you want, but first of all is the picture of the pitch. The one thing about the picture of the pitch, it's absolutely crucial, because what it does is it paints a picture. As the match is developing, you can see how kickouts are going, you can see how shots are going, where both teams are having the most success, whether it be kickouts or whether it be shots. So it gives you a good picture, and it is a pretty basic thing to do, but it is amazing what you can draw out of that. And then just as you can see in the middle there at the top, it's a case of each of the elements between shots, kickouts and turnovers, which are massive in any game. So those are all the major elements that you want to feed into, and obviously you have frees there as well. So it's a case of just jotting it out as you go along. And what you have to do probably is develop your own code, which again is a simple thing to do, and I think Stephen, you lead on to that later on.
Yeah, and I was just thinking, Niall, as well, if you're using this kind of like just a basic pen and paper setup, if you were doing this over the space of a 12 game, 14, 16, 18 game season, and you had this sort of file built up of team performance and against opposition, it's a great tool to have. You can look back and see trends and what players consistently do the same thing. Very useful, isn't it?
It is very much so, and I suppose the one thing is actually making sure you can read it the next time you go back to it, because you have to put so much stuff on it. And I think certainly as the years went on as an analyst, the sheet became more packed with information, because as you grow and develop as an analyst, you're looking to try and obtain as much information as possible. But the bottom line is to ensure that you've got the basic information correct, and that you show it properly so that you can go back to it. And again, as an analyst, you have to be in a position to keep your records, look back at stuff, even if it was something that happened last year or 2 years ago. It's amazing what you can pick up, whether it be your own team performance or else the opposition's performance.
Yeah, because although we're focusing here possibly a lot on our own team, which is probably your key starting point, as times move on, you start looking at the opposition as well. It's just the way things develop.
It is, and it's amazing. I suppose teams do change as time goes on in terms of the opposition, and your own team changes. But it's just again looking for trends. How it's amazing how having 2 or 3 different players can change different things. For example, a midfielder who can catch a ball, maybe playing this year, that individual may be missing next year, and you have somebody else in his place who maybe isn't as successful. So you're looking for ways and means of trying to change your game plan to try and suit that situation. So the likes of this sort of a sheet helps you to build a picture on how that's going.
Definitely does. So if we just move on again now, this might seem like a very basic idea, but it can really help the situation. Where to do it? Traditionally, people are just used to seeing anyone involved in a team sitting in the dugout, but in terms of analysis, it's probably the worst place to be on the pitch. I've put up a picture there on the screen. Fermanagh Donegal just grabbed it of all the guys going for a kick out. You can imagine that just right in front of the dugout of Brewster Park, and that'll be replicated across any club game in the country. If you're sitting from the dugout, just look across the 50-yard line or midfield watching that, it's just a maze of bodies, and you don't really see anything. You probably wouldn't even see who won the break. So you really want to think to yourself, right, if I can get a bit of height here, maybe up on a stand, even behind the goals as well, offers an excellent view. I've showed a wee picture there on the bottom of behind the goals of Brewster Park. And if you were sitting in the dugout, you would probably just see 25 players scattered in front of you. But when you're behind the goals, you can just see a totally different picture. You can see where the space is. You can probably see who's making the run. So you could take a note of that, or even better, if you had a video, you could show it back to the team. So think about that in advance. Of if you're working for a club or a team, think about that in advance of what ground you're going to. Where am I going to be able to do this? Will I have to speak to someone to sit in such a part of the ground? Will they let me up there? Just don't rock up and expect you'll get the best seat in the house, because I'm sure you find out, Niall, over time that quite often doesn't happen, and your plans go awry.
I think purposely so in some cases. You're put to an awkward position, But funny enough, I suppose the one thing actually when you're sitting in the crowd, there's two elements there actually. One is you're inclined to follow the ball, and the second thing is you have the crowd around you shouting, and you hear things. And particularly when you're involved with a team, you can hear things being shouted about someone that's involved with one of your players. You have to ignore it. You have to just focus on what's in front of you. But also, I suppose, I love watching the games from behind the goals. And in fact, I suppose any of the county games I go to now, or if I go to Croke Park, I will always look for a seat or a stand, a terrace behind the goals, because it removes you from, I suppose, the emotions of what's happening elsewhere on the pitch, but also it gives you an overall picture. And it's amazing the difference it makes in terms of what you see going on off the ball as the runs being made. You can see who's the lazy forward, who's making the right runs. All those sort of issues, and it gives you a complete picture of what's actually happening on the pitch.
It does. And then I suppose, if depending on what team you're working with and how they want to work it, you mightn't have to feed any information back to a manager throughout the game, so you could be happy enough that you're 50 yards away, or you might need someone to relay information back and forth to the dugout. But again, that goes back to what we spoke about earlier on. You need to establish your ways of working and what needs to be done all the time. So again, have your plans in place and discuss that pre-game. It's like the outfield. It's like the players in the pitch. They all have a pre-game chat. Analysts are the same. We all need to know how the game plan is going to work.
Again, I suppose one thing I would always recommend, particularly for somebody starting off, particularly I suppose younger fellas, is to bring a friend in terms of a second pair of eyes. Because if you're nervous about starting off and you want to ensure that you've got the information right, first of all, you can only try your best. Secondly, when you have a second pair of eyes, when you're writing down, you might miss something, but the person beside you that's with you can keep an eye on what's happening and be able to tell you. For example, the breaking ball there, when there's a breaking ball, three things might happen. First of all, who won the break? Secondly, somebody was turned over. And thirdly, a free may have been given. So you have three things to record there in the space of about 5 seconds. So it's actually having a second pair of eyes is very, very handy.
Definitely is. I'd agree with that. Have a spotter with you.
Yeah.
So if we move on then, as to who can do it, and it's like all things within a club, we're all looking for bodies and help and people to do all different types of jobs. So and again, it's like all these things at club level, you'd be amazed who could do it, or who might be interested in it. But I suppose a few starting points or jumping off points, whatever team you're involved in, is there a parent of one of the players? You never know. They could have a sports background. They could be an analyst. They could be an accountant. So they've got a numbers orientated head. Is there someone in the assistant coach team or background team that might have an interest in this, and maybe during a game they have very little to do often, so maybe they could do this job for you. If it's an underage team, possibly there's older players available who could be doing sports degrees or could have an interest in this kind of thing, or just want to help out within the club. This could be a job you ask them to do, because they don't have to go to training 2 nights a week. They just have to maybe come to the game for an hour. That's all the time they have to give up. And I suppose that if you can get those kind of people on board, and maybe they're working in the club for a couple of years for a couple of different teams, then they become trained, they become an experienced analyst, and then they can feed back to someone else within the club, and a bit of a loop starts happening. I know yourself there, Niall, you have a wee bit of a loop going on in Darragonley with young Mr. McGoldrick.
Yes,
so
Mark.
Mark, yes. Yeah. It's good to be having someone coming up along behind you.
Actually, sorry, Stephen. I've got the stage now where I'm actually learning from Mark, I think.
I didn't want to say that.
I had to get that in now. But it's great, when you have somebody else coming up. And I suppose one of the things is the fact that, Mark, it was just a case of he started with St. Michael's, and I suppose Dom asked him, because Mark had an interest in football, and wasn't able to play, and as a result of that, wanted some sort of input. So, you know, it can be a mixture. The one thing is, was for some people is not understanding it or not having enough experience of what it entails. And you can go from a very basic level, which can have a major influence on a team and a coaching pattern within a group, to actually do it, I suppose, at the level that we're at. So it's really down to choice, and I suppose it varies in terms of what age group and obviously adult level you're at, in terms of who you want to get involved. But certainly, I suppose, having a knowledge of football is a major starting point. And from there on, anybody can do it. Really can.
Yep, I would agree with that. So move on then. And then I suppose we're all asking the question, with these numbers we're generating and all the stuff we're looking at, how does this actually improve us? So what does this bring to the party? So there's a little diagram there on the side of the page. We'd have seen this at many coaching events and stuff. It's called the coaching cycle. And there's many different stuff goes on within this. But if you look at the analysis section, what we are doing as analysts and interpreting that then helps the whole planning, and coaching and preparation process. So that's kind of where we slot in there. And then that drives better performance. That is the hope. So if you have the information to hand, you're interpreting it properly because you know what's happening, because you've established the principles of play, as we spoke about earlier on. You then can help the coaching team plan for your own team or for the opposition, prepare for that, and then that should increase performance on the day. Again, goes back to what I said earlier. There's a question there, what are we measuring? Are we measuring the right things? So again, make sure everyone is on the same wavelength. They all know what they're doing. You all want to keep the boat going in the same direction, so that you're not wasting time collating stuff, or either wasting time giving out stuff when nobody's interested in it and it's not giving impact or helping the situation. So in fact, it could be making the situation worse if you're giving the wrong information or overstepping your situation. So you're always thinking, get this information to improve the situation. I'd say you'd agree with that as well, Niall?
I would, Stephen, yeah. And I suppose really this is where it boils down to your relationship with the coaching team, in terms of what are they looking for. We, I suppose, as analysts refer to what they call key performance indicators, KPIs, which is referred to quite a bit. And that's where things like kickouts, for example, is one. All of those elements, your shots, your turnovers, frees, all those sort of elements. And it's correlating all that and to try and paint a picture. So generally, I suppose what most teams do, they set targets. And this is a great thing about when you record stats, is that you're able to set targets for your team. So at halftime, you have a target set from the start of the game. So for the second half, you can set your targets for the second half and see how that goes. And obviously then at the end of the game and between that and the next training session, you're putting things together to paint the picture so that your coaching staff know exactly what has to be done with training the following week. And that's what you're trying to do, is work on your strengths. First of all, I suppose, work on your weaknesses and try and improve on those. But also, I think, to focus on your strengths and how well you're doing, and how you build that, how the coaching staff then build that into their training session on the following Tuesday night or whatever it is.
And so this would be one of the areas as well, sometimes where an analyst can get a real kick out of the situation, I suppose, because maybe you have noticed something, the coaches have bought into it and they work in it in training, and then lo and behold, you see that happening in front of your eyes in a match, and maybe a score comes off it, or an opposition kick out is closed down, and you're sitting there going, well, that I'm happy, that's worked well. My job's been done there. I'm sure that's worked for you on several occasions, Niall.
It has, Stephen, but at times it can be quite funny when it can be the opposite as well. I remember Fermanagh playing against Westmeath, and I remember one of the star forwards for Westmeath at the time, he was all left foot, and all the games I analysed in the run up to it, all left foot. So I can't remember who was marking him, but the cornerback had said he's all left foot, just keep him on his right. So the first ball he got, a guy turns and sticks the ball over the bar with his right foot. So as you can imagine, sort of felt a bit stupid, but I think it was the one time that year that cricket report did that. But this is where you got to learn, and you're throwing things out to try and help players and coach and staff. Sometimes, and thankfully a lot of the time it does work. On other occasions it doesn't work.
So this is just a little slide here, opinion versus fact. And here, football's a game of opinions. It's the way it works. Everyone's got them. People spend hours chatting about stuff, pubs, bars, sides of the pitches, training grounds. But our job as analysts is to present the facts. So there's a stat out there which says coaches only remember between 40 to 60% of the game. And some of the games I've been involved in, coaching underage teams and stuff, I'd well believe that. You don't remember half the stuff that happened. And again, you're seeing it from a sideline angle. Loads going on, subs on and off, maybe injuries, red cards, yellow cards, referees, linesmen, huge amount going on. And there's also a wee thing called recency bias, whereas if you as a coach, you might only remember the thing that's happened in the last 5 minutes before half time or the last 10 minutes, and you've totally forgotten about all the good stuff that possibly happened in the first 20 minutes. So this is where an analyst really earns their corn. They're recording black and white facts throughout the game. And so after a game, when the emotion and the adrenaline is dropped away, really good time, sit down, calm environment, watch a video if you're lucky enough to have it, or just review your stats page, either you yourself personally or with a member of the coaching team. And Niall touched on it there earlier on. With all this going on, you still have to remember you're just part of the coaching team. You're just part of the jigsaw. Don't overstep your place. If they want to take your information on board, brilliant. If they don't, so be it. You just got to make peace with it. That's just the way it works. You'd agree with that, I'm sure, as well, Niall?
I would, without a doubt. I mean, the bottom line is, as you said there, Stephen, coaches do only remember a certain amount, and it's just impossible to remember everything. And it's amazing actually the amount of times that you present the details to your coach after the game, or certainly in the days leading up to the next training session, and they can't believe it. They've come out of the game with a different picture to what's actually truly there. And I suppose that's where stats are great. But also what it can do is it can also confirm things that happened, things that actually worked very well. But I always laugh actually, and I suppose always watch with interest after a big game if you've done the stats, who they pick as man of the match. And on the odd occasion, you can be very surprised how whoever's watching for man of the match picks someone, and you find that when you look at their stats, they've had a terrible game. Just because that player has done one or two fantastic things that have influenced the game, but their stats might be terrible, but the two things that they did won the game possibly for the team. But that's what people remember. And I think it just highlights where stats are important, where people came away thinking he was man of the match, when in fact, if you look at his stats, he was maybe one of the worst players on the pitch for the 60 minutes. So I suppose that's where, they are beneficial. It's the breakdown and all of that too. And again, it is this thing of fitting that in with how the coaching team want the team to be moved forward. How important are you to that? Without having a loud influence, you're having a quiet influence in the background, and that's what you've got to remember.
Yep. So that's kind of our whole sort of whole piece there on sort of an introduction as to how you would do it at a basic level within club or school team, pen and paper, bit of technology, and what maybe you should be looking out for. So if we were just to move it on one more little level, just to see where you can take it to, just had a look at last year's All-Ireland final, picked a match that everyone knows, great game, and just look at something like the scores. So as we said, you could spend all your time taking stats on kickouts won and hand passes made and fouls and free kicks and all this sort of stuff. But one of the key things is what coaches want to know is, where are the scores coming from? Because scores win games. Simple as that. So if you look at where the play starts, so where that ball was picked up that went up the pitch directly and led to a score. So if you look at the example here, in the first half, it was 10-all at half time, and Dublin had scored 6 points from their kick out, 3 from a turnover and 1 straight from the throw-in. And whereas Kerry had scored only 3 from their kick out, but had scored 7 points from turning Dublin over. So if you, for a moment here, if we put ourselves in the shoes of the Kerry backroom team, and you get in at half time and you're having your chat to the management, you would go, well, are you happy with that? Is that what the game plan was? So if Kerry, for example, if their game plan was to just give up the kick out to Dublin and let them come down the pitch, and then Kerry's going to meet them and tackle them and turn them over, then it probably worked on one hand because you did turn them over and you went up the pitch and got scores. But the downside is, by letting Dublin have the kick out, they come down and got 6 scores also. So possibly your tactic didn't work. So you might have to look at that again for the second half. And if you look at it then for the second half, something dramatic then happened within the Kerry team. Dublin scored 1-8, but only 2 of those was from kick-outs. Dublin then scored 6 points from a turnover, and then they scored the famous goal from the throw-in that we all remember, where the Kerry midfielder didn't compete very well, and Dublin went straight through and got a throw-in. Whereas Kerry, their scoring rate from turning the ball over just dramatically dropped. You only got 2 points, and so you only got 5 points in total in the second half. So something collapsed there within possibly the Kerry defence. So then just put yourself in the shoes of the Kerry backroom team. Imagine they had a match then the following week. What would they do different in training? Would they do something different in defence? Would they do something different on kickouts? This is the question they would have to ask. So, and just moving it on another level again, this is where the shots happen from in that second half, when Kerry's scoring rate dropped off. And again, this could just be for any club team, and you're just marking it on a page. I'll show it later. And you can see here on the screen, so a green is a goal, white is a point, red is a wide, and yellow is a short. So both Dublin and Kerry got very similar shots away, 15 for Dublin, 16 for Kerry, but Kerry's scoring rate just dropped off. So they could have been turning Dublin over, but when they were getting up the pitch, they just weren't scoring. And you can see there on the right-hand slide, Kerry shot a lot from right-hand side of the D, and they put them wide, they dropped them short. So possibly you, as a Kerry backroom team, you could watch the video back and you might notice that the wrong player got on the ball to shoot. He was shooting from a bad angle. He was shooting on his wrong foot. This is where you can just drill down the levels. And it's the same whether it's the All-Ireland final or a club team. If you have recorded this, and if you're lucky enough maybe to have the video, it's the exact same process, and you will see if the right man got on the ball at the right place on his right foot under pressure or not. And that's just, I've marked it there. This is how you could do that at club level. Just a pen and paper, write it down on a page, and you could build that up as the season progresses, from week to week, from match to match, and build up a record. And you would start collating some serious information. So that's just how you can take it from a basic level and then take it on another step. And then you could take it on another step again and identify it, an individual player or an individual part of the pitch. It's kind of, I'm sure Niall you'd agree, it's kind of never ending where you can take it to. If you have the information, you can just keep going whatever direction you want to take it.
The big issue obviously is not to overcomplicate it.
Yes. And
sometimes that's what happens, it becomes overcomplicated. I mean, you hear I suppose pundits saying it's a basic game. I know Pat Spillane used to give off about analysts and whatnot. There's not a bit need for them. I think when it comes to it, yes, the score is the key stat, but at the end of the day, it's how those scores are created is the bottom line on it, and that's what we're working to do, is to first of all see how you as a team are able to create those scores, but also on the other hand is to try and stop the opposition, and that's what you're doing, is building a picture to allow you to do both of those elements.
Totally agree. That's it. So
sorry, Stephen, just come back there. Just if we go back to the slide that you had on the scores, what was interesting there actually, just the next one, that one, when I just looking at it there too, if everybody sees it, in terms of the Dublin scores, scored 1-1 from their throw-in.
Yeah.
And obviously Kerry didn't score anything, which is a massive stat and a very simple stat. And that was 4 points. I mean, if you take that out of the game, it could have been a very different game. And it just shows you how wee things like that can make a difference. And obviously, it's because Kerry struggled on the throw-in, whereas obviously Dublin maybe had pinpointed it as something, and certainly you could see that at the start of the second half, how the throw-in was crucial to them. So it's just to highlight how a small thing can make a big difference.
And here, that could easily be replicated at club level. Put your big man in the throw-in, win it, and drive through for goal in the first minute. Could win you the game.
That's it, exactly. And when you think about it, it was nearly the smallest man on the pitch that received the ball from that throw-in to score that goal as well. So it was obviously a setup, and it worked extremely well.
Perfect, yeah. So that concludes our sort of a brief introduction to performance analysis and how you could get the ball rolling at club level. So if you have any questions, Jet, I'd be happy to take them.
Yeah, Stephen and Niall, thank you, lads. That was absolutely excellent. Very, very informative, I have to say. You must have been practicing all day, lads. You dovetailed very well there. A bit like Ant and Deck, or maybe the two Ronnies. I'm not sure which, but it worked very, very well. So well done on that, guys. A number of things jumped out at me, and I suppose maybe the first question I'll ask, and I know you've sort of touched on it slightly, but I'll delve into it a wee bit further, is how do you identify the right person for this type of job? And maybe more importantly, what skills and personality does that person need to have?
I suppose first and foremost, they have to be keen to do it. It's one thing about being an analyst. It does take time. You have to be prepared to do a lot of work away from the scenes, where people don't see what you're doing. I suppose people see coaches out on the pitch taking sessions. They see them on the sideline during matches. You're very much in the background, and it's being prepared first and foremost to give the time, but also to be prepared to put it in the hours to do it. At a basic level, it's very simple. It can be done on the day at the match. You can give the feedback during the game, at half time, or after the game. So it's someone that's in a position to do that. I know myself, I suppose my career finished fairly early, and I suppose it allowed me to get into coaching at an early age, and allowed me to, I suppose, it moved on then to doing to become a performance analyst. So that's how I get into it. It was probably because I finished football early. I suppose for anybody else, it's somebody that maybe is in the same position, possibly as a result of an injury, they have a serious interest in it and they want to give something back. Or it's somebody who has finished playing football. The biggest issue for a lot of the guys, I suppose, going forward, the older fellas, I tend to find that they're not maybe as much into it as younger fellas. Younger fellas are big into it. They see it on TV for, I suppose, matches in Croke Park where the facts and figures are put up, so they're into it. So, it can be a combination of both. Somebody that's that bit older has finished playing and has an enthusiasm for it, or say somebody that's youthful and maybe wants to learn.
Yeah, and Stephen, the type of personality, does it matter? I don't think I would be suited to it, I might as well be honest with you, because I think you have to detach yourself from the game, and I would just be enthralled by the game and be passionate, but you'd have to remove all that to do this job here. Would you agree, Stephen?
Yes, I totally agree. It is hard at times. I know myself. I've been going to Fermanagh games for decades, and you're a fan and you're roaring and you're shouting, and then all of a sudden you just your role requires you to just be calm and cool and collected, and it is very hard. Some days refereeing decisions, stuff like that, crazy stuff happens, and you do lose your cool a bit, but you just have to remain detached. And I suppose some people have that in their personality, others wouldn't. I suppose I'd be mindful. I could be wrong here, but there's probably a bit of truth in it. We all know within teams and players we play with, there are the players who love to bang the table and to shout and to roar, which every team needs. They're probably not the best kind of people to be analysts, because emotion drives them. Whereas there are other people within their team and they're happy to maybe just sit nice and calm and relaxed and just want a bit of information and go out and play. They're possibly the personality you could be looking for.
Yeah, well, I can understand you doing the job, but your
Jet, now before you start, Jet, before you start, I've sat beside you during matches as well now, and I can see where you were coming from earlier on. But I have to say, that's something that I really have had to learn over the years, and at times...
At least you're honest now.
At times it does tend to go out the window, but it's been a great learning curve for me, actually, because it does force you, particularly in big games. I mean, obviously, with Derrygonney last year, the likes of the Trillick game, where things were tight, you had to, where everybody else was jumping around you, you had to stay focused. And I mean, that's at that level. And it's just because you are there to pick things out. You are there to advise.
And you really, as you say, Niall, you have to discipline yourself. Which is fair play to you. Because I know from knowing you as well as I do, I know you're very passionate about the game. So I have to admire what you've done in terms of bringing this new skill set to the fore, and you're probably one of the leading men in terms of performance analysis in the county. And so that brings me on to the next question, and that's in and around, and again you touched on it in your seminar, but it's in and around the relationship between the coaches and the performance analysis. It must be, it would have to be very strong, and there'd have to be an understanding of how the coaches want the team to play. I presume that's really the crucial aspect of it.
Yeah,
you can start off now. Work with.
Yeah, I suppose that the way it is, I mean, it is important, and I suppose I've been lucky enough in that I've worked under a number of coaches, and which is good from the point of view of learning. But what you have to do is observe your coach as well, and sort of see what they want. I mean, and I think as experience goes on with coaches, you can know how to work it. You know how to, I suppose, speak to them, and I suppose in a way that is appropriate, that will, I suppose, give them a better knowledge of what's going on. So every coach is different. Obviously, their temperaments are different. Some are big into it, some are not. I've had the odd occasion where I've taken stats in a game and you got to half time and you were ignored. Not very often, thankfully, but where a game is tight or maybe emotions high in the change rooms, sometimes it mightn't be the best idea to give out the stats in certain situations because of the way things are. So it's learning to deal with that, and learning your coach, knowing your coach and knowing what they want. And as I say, each coach is very, very different. They have their own targets and their own way of doing working things, and you have to adapt to them.
Yeah, and Stephen, just in relation to that, leading on from that, then is it frustrating if coaches don't take on board the info you've shared with them? And as a supplementary to that, can this cause friction then between the coaching team? And if so, how do you address that?
Well, yeah, I suppose it is. It can be frustrating. But as I said earlier on, you just have to make peace with it. I suppose it's like players. It's like whenever I have been a coach, even before I became an analyst, it's the same sort of thing. You give instructions to players, and sometimes you take it on board, and sometimes you might as well be talking to the floor. It's the same thing, and you just have to make peace with it. I personally have never really caused friction or annoyance, so I'm just happy I accept my role. I suppose it goes back to the personality thing again. If it was causing you ongoing annoyance and friction, well, either maybe you don't have the personality for it, or maybe you're just not in the correct team environment, correct setup. So maybe just better that you part your ways. But no, I've never had that situation, so can't comment on it, thankfully.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And I'm going to throw the next question at Niall here. But in the meantime, Stephen, I'll ask you to drop down your presentation there, and we'll get the full screen of you two guys now. Niall, how difficult is it for you to convince players of the benefit of performance analysis? If you come into this, if you bring this new to a club or a county or whatever, how difficult is it, do you think, to convince players of the benefit?
The younger guys, it's not a problem, and you can see as they're developing, and I suppose a lot of them have come through the development squads with Fermanagh, where I suppose stats are now used a lot more. It's the older guys, I suppose, for me, it took a wee bit of time, and particularly when you go into an established environment where there's players have been playing for years, and you're actually telling them where they're going wrong. And as you can imagine, a lot of players don't like to hear that. So it's not a case of forcing it down their throat. What you have to do is you do your stats, you make the stats available. Some people will look at it, some won't. It's really down to choice for the players. All you can do is keep putting the information out there, and it's up to them how they use it. So the worst thing you can do is sort of to compete with a player to try and get him to look at your stats and ensure that he's taking it on board. Some guys just don't bother with them, and they're more comfortable in their own skin by not doing that. Others love it. They come to you, they're ringing you on a Monday morning wanting their stats to see how they did. So everybody's different, and it's down to what they want, and you just work it. You make the information available. It's up to them what to do with it.
Yeah, and even at comparing it at club and county level, is it is there some individuals that are maybe resented to a certain extent at county level as well, or is it more prevalent at club level?
Well, I know in my own experience, certainly as was whenever I went in, I think it was one of the first to start doing analysis at the county level. So for a lot of the players, it was a learning process for them too. So it was amazing the difference from the start of the season to the end of the season. How initially, boys would look at you funny. I think because you're there as a critic essentially, and people don't like criticism. They don't like to hear the negative. So I think when you're doing that, they don't particularly like to hear it. But at the same time, when they start to see the benefits of it, when they start to realise that this is all about bettering their game to make them better players overall, they do buy into it, and it's really good to see. But at the same time, as I say, just don't force it on them,
Yeah. And Stephen, have you lost any friends over it?
No.
Analysis?
No, I haven't lost any friends. But here, maybe their opinion of me has changed, and I don't know. But no,
yeah.
so far so
and
good.
Just leading on from that, is there a right time or a right place to provide that feedback to players, and maybe how much feedback do you give individuals, or is that something you learn?
Well, I'd say there's definitely a right time and a right place. And if we go back to Niall's earlier point there, it's that old coaching cliche of you've got to know your players. So you've got to know which ones like it, which don't, which ones you need to stand back from. If you imagine sort of the week leading into a game, if you imagine the Tuesday night session, maybe where a lot of information is presented, and then just as that week progresses on, you just narrow it down. So the Friday night will be 4 or 5 key points. The pre-match meeting will be 3 key points, and then just as you go out in the pitch, could be 1 key point. So you're just using that information and sort of do a funnel process and just narrow it all down. So you're not flooding the players' heads with loads of ideas and stuff. And then when it could be a good time at halftime. The manager could turn to you and ask you your opinion. He mightn't acknowledge you at all. Players can come to you. That's just where you've got to read the room, as they say, engage the situation, and trust in your relationship with the team as well. And that just takes a bit of experience, that area.
Yeah, and Niall, would you always at club level give information at halftime? I know in our time with Peter's backroom team, you would have given a fair bit of information to Peter at halftime, but is that something you do at club level as well?
Okay, I mean, in the majority of situations you do, yes. I suppose, it depends on the coach too, what he wants. I mean, Peter's way of working it was that you went in, you give Peter the stats, and then he spoke to the players using the stats in terms of his team talk. Other coaches are different, that maybe want you to do it yourself and provide the team talk, or not provide the team talk, but provide the information before they give the team talk. And I suppose what it is, when you put it into figures, it makes the boys realise, when they're playing, they think they might be getting on top of kick-outs when in fact they might be only going 50-50. When they realise that they have to improve. It's wee things like that there that can make a difference. So it's, I think half-time, you have very little time. So the last thing you want is listening to like ourselves going on for 10 minutes. So short and sweet, over in a minute. And that's what does it.
Right, okay. And just then, Niall, I know it's something that you've done a fair bit of work on, but what's the balance, maybe is the question, between focusing on your own team's performance and that of the opposition?
Well, I suppose first and foremost, it's vital to have your own team playing well. I mean, what sometimes can happen is it can be too much of a focus on the opposition. The key thing is to get your own performance right. Obviously, particularly when it comes to championship level, and what's interesting, I suppose, is was like when we're involved with the county and also involved with, I suppose, an Ulster club, in that when you're in Fermanagh and you're playing against the same teams week in, week out, you know the players and everybody knows each other. So the players know each other. Whereas when you're coming cold into an Ulster club game or in a Fermanagh game, where you don't know as much about the opposition, you don't know their weaknesses until you sit down and look at the video. So sometimes you have to be more informative in terms of opposition when it comes to that level. Whereas at club level, the boys already know each other.
Yeah. How would you see, Stephen, with different coaches? Would they have varying degrees of information that they would want on the opposition?
Yes. Some of them really want to focus in on what their kick-out strategy is, or some of them are all more interested in how they set up defensively, or some want to know how they move the ball from defence to attack. Is there certain key players always getting on the ball and setting up the play? Is there maybe danger areas on the pitch where you don't want to concede frees? Is there specific areas where they love to put kickouts? And yes, here in general, coaches are really open to that kind of information because it's key to winning or losing the game, and to also maybe helping them in the training process that week. So no, they're open to it, and they're all looking for different bits and bobs, whatever fits their coaching plan.
Yeah, and maybe different coaches. You've worked under Ryan and Rory.
Yeah.
Maybe different coaches have different levels of information that they require. Have you noticed that?
Yes, yes, they would. As I say, some are maybe interested in only 2 or 3 key things. Some want 10, 15, and it could even change from match to match, from championship to league. So it's an ever changing thing, but definitely every manager's got their little style, and that's what they want. You don't be long learned, and you have all that information to hand, ready to go.
It's a very demanding role, because one, you have to log the information and to analyze it, and then be able to deliver it to the coach in a very effective and efficient way. So there is a lot of pressure involved.
There can be, yes. You can be really caught on the spot, and you mightn't have the info to hand, or the iPad mightn't work, or you might just be caught cold, or you mightn't be expecting that question at all. It could be totally left field, and you're sort of standing there going, "Why is he asking me this?" Because I wasn't ready for this one. So you have to be on your toes. And again, that unexpected question, if he asks you it once, you remember that every game, and you probably record that for every game again. So it's just building up that experience.
And look at, lads, it's been a brilliant insight, and I'm conscious of the time, but I have one more question for both of you. But it really has been a very, very interesting discussion, and we could chat away with this all night, and I think our viewers will find it very, very interesting. But I'm going to finish on maybe a wee bit of a light-hearted note, and I'm going to ask both of you this question. I'll start with you first, Stephen. What was the most satisfying piece of info you've passed on to a coach or a player that has made a huge impact?
Let me think on that.
You don't have to be modest on this one now. You're
I don't want to be too specific on it either, because it can blow things wide open. I would say in very recent memory, for Temple last year in a club game, quite a big club game we had. We had got a bit of knowledge on our opposition and on how they like to attack. It was very simple, how they like to play the ball in. And seen the video, and it was repeated and repeated and repeated. And just to be able to show that to my teammates and go, look, this is what we expect to happen. Be ready for it. I'm telling you now, it's going to happen. And lo and behold, it just happened continually in the game. And I suppose it was doubly nice because I was playing in the game as well. To see it unfolding, and I was able to tell the defence, get ready, it's coming there, do this, do that. And and it really worked for us and helped us out on the night. So
yeah, very, very satisfying that. And
very satisfying, yeah.
From your perspective now?
When you're involved with Derry Gunley, you have to sign a confidentiality clause there, Jet. But I suppose going back to Fermanagh days, I remember the Westmeath game, which was I suppose unfortunately the only championship game we won, I think, at that stage, which despite a lot of effort. I remember their keeper at the time. The game was quite tight, but we had I remember focusing in, having watched Westmeath's previous games and noticed how he was weak under a high ball. And if you remember back, a high ball came in and Sean quickly followed it in, and the keeper let it in over his head and into the net, and we won the game. There was a crucial score in the end. But I remember people saying afterwards, Josh, it was only an out-fluky goal. The key thing was we had pointed it out, we'd highlighted that he wasn't good under a high ball. Sean had read the situation and ran in on top of him, and it was enough to put him off. So it was a game, actually. It was a ball that actually won the game in the end up in terms of the score, if you remember.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was a very tight game, as you said. Only championship game we won when we were involved.
I think my biggest problem was trying to keep you calm during that game, actually.
Well, I would agree with you there. But when Johnny Woods knocked over that last point in the dying embers of the game, the calmness went out the window, I think, didn't it?
They did. The iPad went in the air, I think, at that stage.
Yeah. Come here, lads. As I say, I am very conscious of the time, but that has been really, really insightful and informative. And I want to thank you two men for coming along to Fermanagh GAA TV this evening. I hope you enjoyed your debuts on it.
Thanks very much, Jet.
Thank you, Jet. Great time. Enjoyed it.
Good stuff. And no doubt we'll have more of these into the future. Maybe not just in the same circumstances, but I think a lot of coaches around Fermanagh are really enjoying these webinars, so we are going to continue with those, and that leads me on nicely to say that next week's show will be about player development in clubs, and we have two top former Fermanagh players, Marty O'Brien from Devonish and Sean Doherty from Kinawley, coming along to talk us through that coaching seminar. So that's on player development in clubs, and that'll be on your screens next week here on Fermanagh GAA TV. So we hope you can all join us for that. And just to say as well that the June schedule for Fermanagh GAA TV, keep an eye out on that, because our very hard-working Vice Chairman of the County Board, Phil Flanagan, is working away on that. He put in a tremendous effort during the month of May and had these seminars, and he had the Thrana Kesh and a number of games going back over many years for us all to enjoy, and I think we have certainly enjoyed those, and we thank Phil and others for their efforts in putting all those together. So keep an eye out now on the Fermanagh website for the schedule for June. Phil will have that up at some stage this week, and we look forward to all those great memories and those great games that we have witnessed in Fermanagh over the years. But for now, that's it for tonight's coaching seminar. Once again, just a big thank you to Stephen Jackson from Temple Maguires and Niall Smith from Derry Gunley Harps for their presentation tonight. And until we meet again on Fermanagh GAA TV, it's good night from me and slán.